Welcome, everybody. This is the first Industry Leaders Lecture Series for the fall semester, hosted by New York Institute of Technology, College of Engineering and Computing Sciences. Thank you for joining us today. I am going to share a video welcoming everybody from our Dean, Dr. Beheshti. One moment.
It is my pleasure to welcome everyone to the first session of the Fall 2023 Industry Leaders Talk Series. I'd like to thank the College of Engineering's Dean's Executive Advisory Board Chair, Dr. Robert DeFazio, who has been instrumental in organizing the series. Today's Industry Leader presentation is titled Conversational Commerce and How It Puts NLP and AI to the Test. The speaker is Mr. Arnie Lee, Chief Information Officer of 1-800-Flowers.com, and alumni of Engineering and Computing Sciences of the CIO for 1-800-Flowers.com. Arnie Lee oversees all aspects of information technology systems and strategy for the company, including the technology roadmap, software development, cloud, business intelligence, data privacy, data governance, and compliance, and information security. He's continually focused on identifying innovative ways to apply technology to enhance the customer experience and keep the company at the forefront of where consumers are going. Without any further ado, I will pass it on to our speaker.
Thank you, Dr. Beheshti. Mr. Leap, thank you for joining us. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm super excited to spend some time with you today to tell you what we've been up to and how we're seeing the marketplace sort of play out here. It's reasonably exciting times. A little stressful as how fast AI is coming onto the scene. Our journey started 45 years ago with the founders at 1-800-Flowers, Jim and Chris McCann. They were very much in tune with making sure that technology was a part of their business operations. Over the years, they've been in the forefront of a lot of innovation. And it was a super amount of pressure joining the organization almost 10 years ago. They were the first e-commerce site on AOL. And for some of you, you may remember CompuServe. They were also the first storefront in CompuServe, amongst many other technological innovations over the years. Approximately 2 years into my tenure, seven and a half years ago, I received a phone call from Chris McCann, who was the CEO and president and my boss in technology at the time. We quickly learned an awful lot in a very short period of time, iterating upon iteration upon iteration, making sure that we had the right information and really the right context to the customer's intent. And we'll come back to that here as we talk about how AI has progressed over the last couple of months, never mind years. And so we walked down that path. We got through generation 1, we released it. It was sort of a test. It wasn't a mainstream release. We wanted to make sure everything was okay. And we went ahead with generation 2. In generation 2, this was approximately the early part of 2016. We got involved and partnered with Facebook. Facebook Messenger was looking for new applications and the capabilities of their Messenger platform. We built the bot specifically for Messenger. It was actually showcased at F8 by Mr. Zuckerberg himself, and he was chuckling about, wow, it's funny. 1-800-Flowers has got a Messenger bot to sell flowers. somehow you'll never have to call 1-800-Flowers again in order to order flowers. And everybody sort of chuckled, and we sort of had an aha moment. And we were able to progress through the dialogue functionality, which was really where this thing was going. And very quickly, you all know you've had wonderful experiences with bots, I'm hoping, but most of the experiences were probably at some level just not as meeting your expectations as you first thought. And it's because it's reasonably complicated to make sure that we can sort of encapsulate everyone's intent and context or vector, transactional direction that people are going with their chat. Think about the conversations you're having with your friends, your colleagues, your family, your significant others. When you're texting back and forth, you're not reintroducing yourself. You're not logging into a system. You're just carrying on a conversation for day-to-day life. When you step back for a minute and really start to understand the language processing that's required to do that and have every context of that, the human brain is incredibly complicated and fabulous in many, many ways. It's hard to be able to automate that in some level of computer technology, but we're all trying. It's a big part of what everybody is doing. So we coined, well, I don't know if we can take full credit. 1-800-Flowers definitely was early in that marketplace, coining the term conversational commerce. And we sort of stuck to that for the past 7 years or so now. And we've gone through 5 generations of conversational commerce chatbots. And at each stage, we got a little bit more complicated in what we did, the partners that we used. We weren't afraid to shed that technical debt from the prior generation in order to keep moving and progressing forward. What's fascinating is 7 years, 5 generations. In January of this year, you all are probably really aware of how fast ChatGPT and OpenAI started to come onto the scene. What it provided was a very simple communication interface, similar to our Generation 1 Gwyn product, where you just have this bubble conversation, ask it a question, and it would provide an answer. ChatGPT has this ability to really understand natural language processing at a level that most are quite enamored by. So we're at a point where 5 generations, 7 years. We just had a review done by a local newspaper writer from Newsday. And Newsday was basically the comment back, yeah, cool chatbot. It's actually pretty decent, but it got a little confused as they started branching the conversation. So with all the technology implementations and the progressions that we've made, we were still somewhat predetermined in our path. Partly because some of the design around that was, as much as we wanted the bot for customer service, we also wanted to be able to provide the opportunity for you to engage and buy our products from the chat cycle as well. And so from that article, which was published in the November timeframe prior year, in about 9, 10, 12 months ago, we set out in January, after watching and seeing what was going on with ChatGPT, put a 6-week project together and came out with something called Momverse for the Mother's Day period. Very simple implementation of ChatGPT, where you'd ask a couple of questions about your mom in your life, and it would provide you back a very simple and customized and a unique poem, limerick, a song, whatever choice of options you wanted. We learned a lot from that. We had tens of thousands of engagements in a very short period of time, and we started to realize that people were really engaging and want to engage in that type of capability and interaction. We learned a few things about ChatGPT's NLP at the time, and we knew it was advanced in comparison to where we were and that we needed to pivot quickly. So we started off the journey of Generation 6. Generation 6 was kicked off in the 3rd week of May and went to proof of concept completion about the 3rd week of September. just this past September, a couple of weeks ago. We moved so fast in such a short period of time, in about 3.5, 4 months in totality. Not only were we able to replicate the feature and functionality set of all 5 generations, but we were able to enhance the interface capabilities at levels never seen before. Generation 6 is about 10 to 20 times more complicated and sophisticated at the same time than the prior generation. 5 generations, 7 years, 1 generation, 4 months. Some of the tools that we use to implement this particular proof of concept are less than 6 months old at this point, which is one of the reasons why we're taking a little bit of time before we bring it to the public. At the same time, the Holy Grail was achieved as well, where we had some contextual recall capabilities by leveraging the models accordingly. So as we go through the technology cycles, the NLP, the natural language processing, 7, 8 years ago, NLP was around. It was a theory. There was some practical capabilities, but nothing overly sophisticated at the time. If you remember back, Siri was starting to come together in iOS. Google had its pairings of different features and comparable capabilities, but nothing overly serious. We've gotten to that point where it's pretty serious now. The complexity in the communication. I spend an awful lot of time talking to Siri in my car back and forth to the office during my commute. And so anything that I can manage through text and communication with my staff and team members, I do a lot of that catch up, either voice phone calls or text, and I'm talking to Siri in the process of doing that. Fascinating concept. Why is that relevant? Well, 45 years ago, 40 years ago, 35 years ago, the company progressed to a point where it was just not one flower shop on the Upper East Side, but it turned out there was about 10 shops in the 5 boroughs of New York, and they had acquired a phone number, 1-800-FLOWERS. They were receiving more phone calls than walk-ins to the shop, and Jim and Chris realized that this was the future. Think about that for a minute. You all are using websites and mobile technology, and you can see the visual representation of dozens upon dozens of products within the interfaces. You can find a category of product. You can select a product from the collection page, put it in your checkout, and be able to check out and buy that product for a loved one or a significant other, etc. Think about what had to be done in order to do that. And how would you do that? By voice. So here we are 35 years later, perfecting natural language processing, making sure we have contextual recall, where the customer has reference to prior engagements with us, as well as us having prior reference of engagements with our customer, to be contextual in that conversation and be able to provide a level of service where the human beings start to understand that the bot may actually fully understand what's going on versus just talking to a bot. We went from voice to web, and now we're going back to voice. So further technologies as we go, synthesization of voice capabilities now is phenomenal with a little help from AI. And so now once you start to get the conversation down, that you understand the language that's being spoken, that you have the ability in the contextual recall to make it relevant in the conversation, the sophistication starts to become endless. Large language models, NLP, the technology and the advancements just in the last year alone are at breakneck speeds. And we understand, and because of this 7 years investment to date in conversational commerce, we believe we're well positioned going forward, that as the customers change in their choice and preference of technology, that we'll be right there with them to help them celebrate the wonderful events in their life. The technology and the cycles that we're talking about have been incredibly challenged by so many different so many different companies and the lessons learned. The relevancy of context is so important. We learned one thing from Google, and it was funny, it was Google at the time. This was probably generation 2, maybe generation 3. We have a whole bunch. If you saw my office right now, you'd see a history of 7 years of devices that were used in this journey. And Google, their Google Home product was an interesting product when it first came out. And we were so focused on making sure we had capability versus speed and efficiency. The response times to some of the APIs that we needed to call to get relevancy and data from our systems was well in advance, well past 300-400 milliseconds, but it was underneath a half a second, which is still pretty good. If you look at a website today, 300 milliseconds in response, 500 milliseconds at times is tolerable. You sort of wait for it. You know, the internet is not as efficient as it should be, et cetera. So we're all willing and conditioned to wait just a little bit to get that page to refresh. We had some challenges with the Google Home piece where we were getting to a point where it was timing out. We got on the phone with the engineers, and the engineers are saying, well, yeah, if you don't respond in 200 milliseconds or less, we time out the session because we're not sure if you're coming back. Well, 200 milliseconds, I mean, we'd have to go back and re-engineer a few things. And we did. Became generation 3.5, maybe 4 at that point. Started to realize that even more information needed to be at the edge or retrievable in a way that is incredibly quick and efficient. And so as we went through those cycles, we learned those different engineering feats. Tools have changed, capabilities have changed. And we know that from one generation to the next, it could be as short as 6 months, like the latest generation. And we get to that point where we're not overly in love with one step versus the next, but we know that the journey can be a continuous improvement capability. So I'll step back for a minute. That was sort of the technology side of it. Now I'll give you a little insight to the staffing side of it and the technology side and what the developers are going through, and then what the business is going through as well. As a CIO of 100 Flowers, at the end of the day, no matter what, I'm responsible for making sure we continue our journey on digital transformation, whether it be our natural language processing capabilities, whether or not it be conversational commerce, whether or not it be our e-commerce, traditional sites, mobile apps. But we also have to worry about supply chain and a few other areas as well. And so we sit back and I started to think about it, started talking to a bunch of partners here. And much more frequent as of late, as you can imagine. Break it down into three pillars for myself in the way I'm framing this equation. There's consumption of information. There's comprehension of information. And then there's discernment of said information. It's those 3 major steps that are important. What we've learned in our journey in the web is once the web became available late 97, 98, 99, all of a sudden there was a whole bunch of more information that was available to us as human beings to consume. Google came along and really changed the way search worked, made a huge business out of it, as you're all aware. At the same time, Google would present a whole bunch of answers to your query to the internet. And it was your job to fully comprehend what was being presented. More importantly, you had to select links and sort of thumb through it and see what's what and try to discern one thing versus another, whether or not it was valid or not, et cetera. And that was sort of the way of life up until about a year ago when OpenAI came on the scene, and their large language models sort of consumed an awful lot of information around the world in different contexts. And we had this interface where you could ask it a question and it actually provided an answer. And without going into crazy details how large language models work, the answers were pretty decent. But you still need to be a reasonably subject matter expert to discern whether or not you really could leverage the information or not. And this is a key piece for any organization trying to keep moving forward in their digital transformation. There is a true balance of speed, volume, and continuous improvement of simple models that I just described between consumption, comprehension, and discernment. Depending on the teams and groups involved within the enterprise, our approach to AI and digital transformation must vary. Working with our e-commerce teams is very different than working with our marketing operations or business analysis teams. It is my belief that there is efficiency gains across the enterprise and different forms of currency at different times, different budgets, different process improvements, depending on where we are in that iterative process. The comprehension side really boils down to training, team collaboration, experimentation, and proof of concepts. That's key. Got to keep iterating. You have to have that culture of being able to try something, and failure is okay. What did you actually learn from it is more important. Skill set transformation. Of all the things in the last 3 months now, after seeing and understanding, starting to understand the impact of large language models and generative AI and what that really means, our technology group here at 1-800-Flowers is going through a significant transformation as it relates to skill sets and roles and responsibilities. We have to embrace the change as quickly as the technology is changing. And this is one of those times. Think back 20 years ago when we were just really getting sophisticated in the World Wide Web, and application servers started coming onto the scene and complexity there. Think about how software development jobs changed, what was involved, operations, how that worked, why it worked the way it does, the interconnectivity, the capabilities there drove a huge skill set transformation. I think we're seeing another one of those now. Engagement in AI communities. We advocate communicating and talking to anybody that's willing to have a conversation back. It is so important. And then, of course, the most important piece of this is setting up frameworks and sandboxes in such a way that you can enable all of your enterprise employees to be able to use this technology and leverage it accordingly while applying ethics and governance frameworks around it. As much as I love to talk about technology, I have spent 30 to 40% of my time dealing with the ethical and the governance side of the model appropriate for 1-800-Flowers. You know, once you start going through that comprehension cycle and you start seeing it, the decision making, right? In business, we have to gather information, consume it, comprehend it, got to make some decisions. Now we got to keep going. What's next? How does this work? What's driving this? Areas of focus on the discernment side or decision-making cycles for us are in and around generating additional data for augmentation. Scenario simulations, very important to have simulations. Vector content creation, so taking data, understanding the scenarios, then applying directional vectors to content and other data sets become incredibly valuable as you hydrate and ground new large language models in your generative AI journey. Supply chain optimization. I would be remiss in not talking about supply chain. As we keep going, there's a couple of things coming out in the marketplace here. Some of our strategic partners include Google, Microsoft, SAS Analytics down in Raleigh, North Carolina, to name a few. I have had dozens upon dozens of conversations over the past 6 months as it relates to what are they all doing? Where are they investing? What are they focused on as far as natural language processing, how that works, why it works, what's next generation look like? What other AI implementations are they doing? You all know that Microsoft just laid in $10 billion into OpenAI. They sort of drew everybody in on a basis that they're going to introduce Copilot here for general availability here in the fourth quarter of the calendar year, where Office 365 is going to have a Copilot. You're going to be able to chat with your email, chat with your PowerPoint presentations, chat with your Excel spreadsheets, or any other data within the Microsoft 365 environment. How does that change the way we do things? I'm excited. I could sit here and say, Copilot, I have a meeting at 4:00 today. Please pull together last 6 months of interactions by email, PowerPoint, spreadsheets, whatever other information can be found on my OneDrive, and put it in a 6-page summary PowerPoint so I have meeting notes walking into the meeting. The theory is Copilot goes off and generates those 6 slides. And now within a matter of minutes, which would have taken me more than 30 minutes, maybe an hour to prep for the meeting, depending on the meeting topic, I have it right in front of me as I walk into the meeting. The efficiency levels gained are going to be tremendous. Some people are saying 20 to 40%. I'm willing to say at least 10 to 15% across the board. Now, the question is, what do we do with all that extra time gain? It sounds like we're going to have more work to do. That's where roles and responsibilities start to change. We need to start to adjust and move things forward and continue to watch and see how technology advances our day-to-day capabilities. With all of the excitement around the topic of generational AI, not every business challenge needs AI for it to be super successful. One of the things that we did 2 years ago is we hired specifically data science master degree holders. We hired 2 of them, put them right in the middle of our technology group. And the reason is as mathematicians, it was more important to solve the problem first than trying out some new stuff that just came out on the market. Probability of sale, depending on a user's interaction with our website, is a mathematical calculation. It doesn't necessarily have to be AI. Why? Because everybody believes that there's a super amount of information that's needed to feed a model in order for AI to work. What we'll slowly start to figure out here in the next couple of months is that if you have the right vector data set for the right model at the right time, you can do some really magical things in a very short period of time. Now we're back to those 200 millisecond response times where you're not waiting for a model to crunch, 500 million records at a time. You're worried about 5 or 6 records that are running through a large language model in real time in order to provide answers back at some level. This is where comprehension and discernment come into play as we circle back towards humanity. Our enterprise data lake was coming together in a product called Snowflake. Some of you may know Snowflake. This is not an endorsement or a commercial for Snowflake, but I wish that technology was around 30 years ago. And we were challenged one another by the generation of those vectors. One of the conclusions was the technology team needed to have the appropriate expertise to continue to advise and lead as necessary as experts in our field. We repurposed part of the team, and we'll do it again as we continue to go through generation 6 of our chatbot and towards generation 7, laying out the framework for generational AI and augmented capabilities and assistance will help the enterprise of 1-800-Flowers continue to provide an effective way for people to share and celebrate with their loved ones and significant others. That's really all the slides and talking points that I have in reference to NLP and generational AI. So I thought it'd be really good to keep it to reasonably 30 minutes, but I'm here to be challenged by any of your questions.
Mr. Leaf, thank you so much. It's amazing how fast the technology is going and all the wonderful things that's going on. Does anybody have any questions? I'm not seeing anything in the chat. Okay, so we have a question from Rob. As your implementations moved from generation to generation, can you comment on how many customers became comfortable with the online chat to finish transactions rather than needing a person? In the last implementation, do you think people can recognize the difference between Chat GPT and a human?
Great question. Yes, over time, we've seen the benefit, right? And so in our customer service organization, 3 times a year, we have our holidays. So we're a little different than your typical holiday commerce company. Christmas is our largest holiday. We'll do between 8 and 9 million orders in a 6-week period. Our second largest holiday is Mother's Day, followed by Valentine's Day is our third largest holiday. Each one of those holidays represents different challenges and different customer engagements, which is fascinating in its own right. During the Christmas holiday, that 6 to 8 week period from the second week of November all the way through to December 23rd, the volume of 8 to 9 million orders in that time frame gives us an incredible large volume of just interaction with our customers, orders coming through, customer service agents, etc. That agent pool at that time of year is approximately 3,000 agents. At the Mother's Day period, it varies a little less to about 2,500 agents. And believe it or not, Valentine's Day is the highest number. It's between 3,800 and 4,000 agents. Why? Because we only get a couple of days to perform. Unfortunately, there's a characteristic of certain shoppers during Valentine's Day that they wait until last minute, and then they expect us to help them to try to figure out how to keep them out of doghouse. And so there's a huge bow wave of additional customer service requirements as well. Rob, to your question, over the course of the last 2 years, we've seen a decline in the size of our customer service agent pools by more than 25%. And that's significant cost savings because of what's involved with training an agent, getting them online, making them proficient. The other thing that chatbots and conversational commerce does and interaction is it makes the experience consistent. Because as human beings, hiring 3,500 people to do a job, you're going to have variations in the quality of that. We know that. We understand that. And so with the conversational commerce capabilities and chatbots over the years, we've made huge improvements over the customer service aspect and keeping it consistent, not only for our customers, but also within policies and how we address certain customer service issues. So yes, there is a nice return on that. I can't necessarily give you specific numbers, but it's certainly funding the R&D on the savings side.
Fantastic, thank you. I have some other questions coming up here. So from Larry. Hi, Larry. Thanks for joining us. Do you find that people are more accepting to chatting with a bot now that the technology advanced? At this point, can a customer tell if they are chatting to a bot or a human?
You can still chat. Yeah, it's a great question, Larry. You can still tell you're chatting with a bot because you'll get to an end point in the conversation based on the latest version that we have. So the technique around that to be able to sort of hide that just a little bit has to do with looping and mutual intent processing capabilities. Once you get to that point, it becomes very fluid. The conversation becomes incredibly fluid at that point. We have that in our labs. We like what we're seeing. We know that this is going to be a wonderful step forward. As a part of that, one of the areas that we absolutely knew early on was that we wanted to control the bubble flow of the chat. So at any point where the bot reached an endpoint and the customer became frustrated, we would be able to pass that chat conversation, the bubble stream, over to a live agent seamlessly we learned that from, of all partners, was Apple and our iMessage integration capability. So if you go to our mobile web, 1-800-Flowers.com on your mobile phone, specifically the iPhone, you can go scroll to the bottom. There'll be a bubble for chat, and you can click that chat button and you can get involved with a communication directly using iMessage through Apple Business Chat. And so one of the things we learned there is to be able to pass that bubble context between a human being and back to the bot. In our next generation, that will be seamless. You'll be able to ask for it to speak to a human, you'll get to a human. If you want to pass that back to the bot, you'd be able to do that. We've actually been talking with Apple to see if we can get a different colored bubble other than blue or green to be able to identify that we're talking to a bot. We are asking for our corporate color purple, our shade of purple that we have in our logo, to be able to show that you're communicating with bots. So the context is a great question. We're not quite there yet, but we have it right in our labs right now. We like what we see.
Great, thank you. Okay, we have some more questions coming in. From Jeffrey, how has the overall workforce been impacted? Has there been a reduction or more of a shift to accommodate the needs and support of AI?
That's the beauty of technology. It's a great question, Jeffrey. The beauty of technology, if you're in it, you got in it because of the rapid change and the progression and the capabilities of what's next, the opportunities. It's funny, you sit in my organization is approximately 325 people, and we all yearn for that next new technology to be a part of that journey, right? We all want to see what's next. We all want to be in part of that engagement process. As far as the staff size is concerned, we're generating more opportunity by going down these paths than the reduction of need. And so we've been very good at managing our staff levels where we're not reducing staff, we're just changing roles and responsibilities. And that tech continues to change, it continues to influence that. The skills in software development used to be Java. Now it's not necessarily Java, it's JavaScript. It's not Node.js anymore, it's Next.js. And you start getting into all those different areas, Kubernetes and Google Cloud platform, as well as Azure. You start getting into all these other places, and all of a sudden there's this new distraction, there's new technologies, new capability, new skills that somebody wants to learn. And so we're at that point where it's sort of cultural to us. And we worked really hard at that. My experience prior to 1-800-Flowers was small software development companies that were delivering goods and services, products and services to Fortune 500 on a global basis. We had to be nimble. We learned that early on. And those same lessons learned are being applied to our people. Don't get me wrong, we're a tough neighborhood. We expect excellence out of our staff, but we're very supportive of one another and very, very fluid and agile about what's next and what may come up tomorrow.
Great, thank you. We have a question from David. Given that AI is impacting the world and we are probably at an early stage, is there any way or hope to combat the problems we face now with all the information available? And what are the problems we can expect from this new transition?
Oh, great question. David, you must have been listening to our board presentation yesterday. I had a board meeting yesterday, and that came up, and it's the security side of this. As much as we talk about all these wonderful technology advancements, we also have to worry that the bad guys are advancing just as quickly, and if not more creatively. Public information is a challenge. Think about all the information that you share on social media networks, all the different little pieces of information that you're sharing. Look back at your LinkedIn profile and all the information that's being shared there. Then you start to realize that there is an awful lot of public information for social engineering. And so with AI, this becomes even more relevant going forward, because the scalability of reasonable approaches to security is pretty daunting. So as much as we go on offense with our chatbots on one side, we go on defense on the other side with the security side of the world. Be careful with your public information and how it can be leveraged against you. Where does AI fit in all of this? You may have seen within the last couple of months, there was a insurance company that did an advertisement with Tom Hanks. And that was completely generational AI. It was not Tom Hanks. It was a rendering of him, etc. Just like this voice conversation that this Zoom meeting today, my voice is being recorded. It's being recorded in context in different ways. The ability to synthesize and break apart this entire conversation, then leverage it and reassemble it accordingly, could be used against me or my family as it related to a hostage situation. That's not actually a physical hostage situation. It's just a virtual one. So everybody's received that email from the Nigerian prince. The difference is no longer an email. It's now a phone call. And that is a synthesized voice that could be me talking to my wife, saying that I'm in a lot of trouble, et cetera, et cetera. So security is changing as well. The one bit of advice I could give you is make sure you have a code word between you and your family. So anybody that calls you, no matter what the threat is or whatever the reason is, that's fine. Tell me what the code word is. And one of two things will happen. They'll either give you the code word and then you got to deal with that appropriately, or they just hang up and move on. So some of these little simple things become very relevant as we keep moving forward. So it's security profile a year, 2, 3 years ago, we were worried about one thing at a time: denial of service, maybe a ransomware attack, and they're sort of one-off events. What we're seeing, even at 1-800-Flowers, and we're not a super primary target like commercial banks or insurance companies, but we're seeing multiple vectors now at the same time, and we know what's generating that traffic and how those patterns exist. So we're sort of like that super test bed for people to sort of hone their skills and sort of move on. So it's something that we do have to pay very close attention to, and it will be fascinating to see over time how the vectors and approach changes to this.
Thank you. Excuse me. We have one more question from
Sure.
Roberto. Great talk. What kind of task AI won't be able to do and that people will continue to do from your point of view?
We should, as human beings, we should never truly trust what an AI model tells us. There should always be some level of humanity that gets applied. The level of discernment that's needed may change over time, but it should never be incredibly final. We all talked about the singularity moments and whether or not AI becomes conscious that it's actually interacting with humans. I don't think we're going to see that at the level that some people are saying that we may see. We control it. We're the humans. We really need to take that approach going forward as we stay in control. And if it gets out of control, you unplug it. Basic, simple approach there. I honestly, it's a great question, Roberta. I think we're a few years off before we have to worry about that next generational piece. What's interesting to me right now is the generational aspect of this and how fast you can layer models to do different things. Look at the Screen Actors Guild out in California going on strike about all this virtual capability of AI, right? They have a reason for worrying about that. I saw a demonstration of 4 models layered on top of one another, actually generating the next sets of episodes for the Star Wars saga, because the models had the Star Wars canon, complete canon in it, and was able to then leverage everything about the storylines, etc., and would generate a 45-minute script in about 20 minutes. That changes the world, right? But at the end, you still got to read the script and make sure you agree with it, that it's a good thing to actually produce. So no matter how advanced it becomes, there should still be human beings involved. The example of the co-pilot with Office 365, I would never hand out the 6-page PowerPoint deck as my final answer to any set of things. It becomes synthesized information for me to be able to do my job more effectively and more efficiently. So it's good question. It will be exciting to see what happens in the next year or so.
Thank you. We have one last question from
Okay.
Rob. Rob came back to the chat.
All
Related
right.
to one of our previous questions, when you hire new grads, how ready do you find them to start contributing to NLP and AI projects? In other words, how much in-house training is needed? Weeks, months? Is there anything more you would like to see universities do?
Well, great question. I had a wonderful conversation with Dr. Beheshti about 6 months ago on this. And so much so that I'm part of the fall semester in faculty in New York Tech, giving a conversational commerce type of special topics course. And basically what that does is take this conversation, spread it out over 15 weeks, and we get into quite a few details. New grads, I'm not necessarily looking for the aptitude as much as I'm looking for the creativity of solving problems. It is important to have the science side of computer science and making sure you understand the details of this. Because you do. In our world, we sell flowers and gourmet food, but just last week, I had a conversation about linear algebra matrices and the decision context, graphs, weighted graphs, all sorts of wonderful, data structures and algorithms that have to be used and leveraged. And then when at the high level, you go back and assemble all these great products that are available on the market, which is why our proof of concept was done in 4 months. That's the problem solving. You can have the smartest kids coming out of school understanding all algorithms, but if they don't know how to apply those skills in some form of fashion to solve a problem, we have to walk through that process of problem solving. So it's an evolutionary thing. It's certainly going forward, we're going to see that shift. It's going to take a little bit of time, but we're going to see that shift. All of a sudden now, we're going to get back to solving problems and keeping things reasonably simple as we apply complex scenarios to each of those problem areas. Thank you, Rob. That was a good one.
Right now, we are going to move over to Dr. Beheshti's closing remarks video. So just one moment.
Thank you, Mr. Lee, for the great presentation. Thank you all for participating in this event. Thanks go to colleagues who made this event happen, Dr. Robert DeFazio, Assistant Dean Jean Polizzi, and the College of Engineering staff, particularly Ms. Jill Rogers. Please tune in for the next talk because it will be advertised through the same channels you'll learn about this. Have a great afternoon.
So thank you, everyone. And those next talks this semester are being held on November 2nd and December 7th at the same time. If you're interested, please take a look at our website and please register. And Mr. Leap, thank you so very much for spending the time with us
You're very
today,
welcome.
sharing all the valuable information and all the exciting things that are happening. Really appreciate it.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
Yep. Bye-bye.